Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friends Courtney Truss and Sam Clement. Y'all say hello.
Hey, John.
How's it going?
Doing fantastically. Thank you for asking. I will tell you what's not going fantastically right now, guys. It may be staffing shortages, flight cancellations, ever-changing CDC guidelines on what's going on, how you should respond to the Omicron variant, going from 10 days to 5 days. What are you supposed to wear a mask, all that stuff. Guys, I got to tell you, I'm probably more confused about what I'm supposed to do about COVID now than I was this time 12 months ago, and we've been dealing with this for close to 2 years. I mean, Courtney, your thoughts on that?
Oh, I totally agree, John. I'm also equally confused. And it's whether or not you're fully vaccinated and boosted, and what does that even mean anymore? People kind of using that terminology interchangeably. It is a bit confusing for sure.
Sam, how about you? Are you confused at all? No, you're a pretty level-headed guy. You're not you're not confused very often.
I'm pretty confused about especially the timing of it and why now all of a sudden everything's changing and why now we're getting to be where it seems like people who were very fine with shutting the economy down are now trying to mitigate that and policies that we got to keep the economy open for people who hadn't said that for the last 18 months, and now all of a sudden people are going out saying, well, we can't do this and shut the economy down again. So that's where my confusion comes from.
Well, I mean, I hear you on that. I mean, I've been reading articles, I think like states like Rhode Island, once they said, if you're not vaccinated, you get fired. Now they're completely reverse that, really just due to staffing shortages. All of a sudden you fire people that aren't fully vaccinated. I guess that's 30% of the population across the country. In some states such as ours, that's even more. And you say you can't work unless you're fully vaccinated. You're just taking out a huge chunk of the workforce. So yeah. I'm wondering if that has anything to do with, taking the mandates down from 10 days after you're exposed down to 5 days. I mean, what do y'all think?
Oh, I think that's driven by the corporations, not necessarily by. I think the CDC has lost a lot of its legitimacy through a lot of this, and I think it's always been corporations that typically drive policy through one way or another, and I think that's no different here.
Well, and I'm sure y'all both being, in the investment world and having to speak to clients about our investment strategies and stuff like that. A lot of times policies directly affect the market. Mm-hmm. And in this situation, it is very clear, right? In published articles, it says that the CDC lowered the number of days that they are suggesting for quarantine because of staffing shortages.
Right.
Not because of any medical backing,
right.
At least according to the article in which I read. What are your thoughts, just based off of y'all's expertise and dealing with the economy, on how you think that this will affect, whether it's directly the airline industry or just the market as a whole?
Well, I think you're just seeing you're finally starting to see some people that were fine with it at first and fine with some of these shutdowns at first really starting to push back on it now. And I think there's becoming more of a consensus around that, which I guess kind of answers partially some of my confusion about why things are changing now. I think the tide is changing in a lot of areas, and I think you're even seeing it in big cities like New York. I think Eric Adams, the new mayor-elect there, just has a completely different tone than the previous administration did up there, valuing keeping schools open and the value that it provides to kids. And if that's happening in New York City, one of the areas that has shut down their economy continuously, I think you're seeing it in a lot of other parts of the country as well, even in other states such as California that have had some of these significant lockdowns.
Taking the nerd quotient up from there, Courtney, I would say that, we're looking at a labor force participation rate in the United States which is near historical lows. And that's just the number of people who are actually participating in the workforce. We have over 11 million jobs that are going unfilled because people just aren't going to take them. So when we're seeing or have seen mandates or restrictions or CDC guidelines that are saying, you get rid of these people, you got to wait at 10 days and what have you, that's just, making a bad situation already worse. And so that's where I think, corporations are putting their hands up going, guys, you got to give me a break. I'm already having trouble getting people in the doors here, and now you're making me quarantine people or telling people that are important to my business, they've got to go home for 10 days. That's not going to work.
And I think you're seeing so much of this pushback because of, and I get data changes and there's new information, but I mean, people were told once you were vaccinated, you were fine.
Yep.
You weren't going to get it and you
Yeah.
could go back to normal. And now, essentially, in a lot of areas of the business, we were all talking about being confused about all the new rules. It doesn't seem like there's that much difference between whether you're vaccinated and unvaccinated and how you're treated in a lot of public areas. So I think that's just a continued frustration. And I'm not saying that there isn't a reason for it. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But the fact is that people were told one thing and then now essentially the complete opposite has happened. And I think people get pretty tired of that.
Now, Courtney, you spent some time really up on Capitol Hill working, for elected officials and whatnot. So then you work for a lobbyist firm. So you probably have a different view on policy. Now, would you say that your experience has been when you're more in the public sector, whatnot, you kind of view policy like, hey, 10 days, that's fine, and the public sector and the private sector just has to deal with it. And so would you say that's been your experience until all of a sudden here we are seeing a situation where the private sector is saying, guys, we can't deal with this any longer?
Right. I mean, I do think, obviously, from when I was in D.C., which was a long time ago.
Not as long ago as it was when I was in D.C.
I do think, I mean, obviously, the lobbyist, that's a big, with elected officials, I mean, that's how they get elected. I mean, obviously, having money to run a campaign and all of that is so important. And so they are looking at their constituents and trying to make the best decision. Of course, I drank the Kool-Aid and believed in the representative that I worked for. But yes, I think part of it, one, is you realize that it's about control and it's about sometimes it can be for personal gain, that people enjoy the power that they get with being in political.
No,
Politicians would never go.
Career politicians.
I just find that really hard to believe that ego and personal financial gain
I know,
has
imagine
anything
that.
to do with being a politician.
Yes. So that's part of it, and I think that they're having to backtrack because they enjoyed it so much in the beginning, and then now we realize, hey, we can't close schools. Look at the mental health of our students. They need to be around each other. They need to interact. So it's kind of assessing that, and we've been doing this for, John, like you said, 2 years, and I think people, to your point, clearly, the airline industry has said, hey, they had to, since December 24th, there's been over 15,000 flights that have been canceled. I mean, that's drastically affecting their bottom line if they're having to cancel flights. And so, yes, they have a great group of lobbyists, and they probably can tie it to a specific number. And, they have enough, enough muscle to...
Clout?
Yes, there you go. Thank you. To get it
Of course, Courtney was looking at me when she came up with that word, muscle, and she's absolutely right. Welcome to the gun show. No, but in terms of the airline industry, you put a mandate of 10 days after exposure to COVID. Let's face it. All those flight attendants, all those pilots, everyone on that metal tube that's going through the atmosphere, you got one person on the plane, guess what? They're all exposed to COVID. So if you were really going to follow the letter of the law and whatnot, we wouldn't have an airline industry. I mean, because everyone's exposed all the time in so many form or fashion. But when you expand this on out, there's more than just flight attendants and pilots involved in the airline industry. There are gate attendants, baggage claim folks. All these people are very important to making sure that flights are moving around on time.
You have to have all those people, especially for the airline. If one part's missing, it's kind of hard for any of the others to really do their job.
Well, and to that point, I mean, yes, everyone kind of wants to get out and wants to travel, and I'm sure a lot of people kind of push back travel for 2022. And now this is an issue, but you look at it, okay, yes, it's functioning, and okay, now we've said 5 days, let's just say whether or not you're actually still contagious, the quality of travel, the experience in which you're having, do y'all think that will deter people anyways? I mean, if you're still having flights being delayed, if you're still having are people just going to say, forget it, I'm just going to push it to 2023?
Well, listen, the experience that you have on travel now is much different than it was when I was a kid, back when we were taking the covered wagons across the country. But in all seriousness, when we would go on a flight, they would at least give you a sandwich, or something. It's now I'm lucky to get a pat on the head. And
do you even want that?
Well, I mean, it all depends. But I'm lucky to get that. I think really, for all intents and purposes, service is just down just in general. And then when you put these mandates on, everyone has to wear a mask. You can't touch each other. You can't interact normally with one another. The overall service level on a lot of these things is just going to go down. And that's why I think you're seeing some of these, you keep on reading about people just acting violent in public with one another when they've been quarantined for such a long period of time, and then truthfully, because of all this stuff, we've forgotten how to act with one another.
Yeah, and I mean, when airlines used to be regulated and they couldn't really compete on price as much, that's when you really saw airlines competing on service. And naturally, since they weren't regulated, you start to see some compete on price, but it's really just gotten down to the numbers for a lot of them. I mean, just getting from point A to point B, and with all these cancellations, I think you're seeing issues. And I think anecdotally, you are seeing people saying, you know what, I'll just delay that trip. We've looked at doing that because, flights across the country are expensive right now. Going to Europe's extremely expensive right now. And if things are going to be so difficult, if you can't do half the things you planned on doing when you were over there and you can't guarantee you're going to get back, I don't want to do that.
Right.
I would rather wait and take that trip when I can guarantee that I can get there easy, I can get back easy, and I can check off all the things I wanted to do while I'm over there.
Well, I mean, I completely agree with you, and I wholeheartedly agree. Now, shifting gears just a little bit, talking about just staffing shortages and whatnot, I read this morning that President Biden in his meeting has met with members of the meat packing industry and whatnot, just due to the fact that meat prices have been soaring. There's a shortage of chicken breast and whatnot, and thighs are now becoming more prevalent on restaurant menus because they can't find breast and wings. And meat, I mean, a pound of ground round, depending on where you're asking. Okay, I'm going to tell you this. Last night I went grocery shopping. Saw my friend Charles in the grocery store and kind of looked around. The produce section at the Piggly Wiggly, I'm not going to tell you which one, but the Piggly Wiggly, and yes, for those of you outside the South, Piggly Wiggly's real. It's a real thing. It's a grocery store. The produce section, it was almost empty. There was very little in there, and this was in the Piggly Wiggly in a decent section of town. The meat section was well picked through. Lots of things were missing from the dairy section. I've never been to that particular store and seen so much stuff just gone. Not there. Yeah. Not there. It's not that people, it's not like you missed. This was more than just, hey, the delivery's coming in at 8. Mm-hmm. I mean, this was sort of like, I turned to Charles and said, what in the hell's going on here? Because I really don't know. I bought 2 pounds of ground chuck, and it sent me back over $15. Ground chuck used to be about $3.99 a pound here, and all of a sudden I'm paying $7 a pound. There's something certainly going on, and what the meat packing industry was telling, or the meat industry, and that sounds so weird, but what the meat industry was telling President Biden is it has to do with labor shortages. To process cattle, to process chicken, you have to have people to do it. It's not completely automated. And when you're having an already low labor force participation rate, when you're mandating 5 to 10 days just for exposure, to someone that has COVID, particularly with this Omicron variant, which does not seem to have the same mortality rate, which seems to be, listen, I'm going to get some pushback on this, more of a strong cold than it does some kind of deadly thing that's going to knock you dead in just a second. All of a sudden we have people just being exposed, not being able to show up for work. How does that not cause troubles in the supply chain, troubles with empty shelves at grocery stores?
Well, then how does the new kind of OSHA mandate that is about to go to the Supreme Court, I mean, that seems to be doing more of this same issue.
Right.
Mandating people to be vaccinated or tested. We've seen the inaccuracy of testing. We've seen people test positive that never knew they had it, asymptomatic the entire time. How is that not going to continue to cause more labor shortages? It just seems like we're doing, as much progress as we've talked about making, people starting to push back on some of these policies, yet some of these other policies that are going to just make things worse are continuing to happen, especially when been shown time and time again that you can still transmit the virus and still get the virus whether you're vaccinated or not. And this arbitrary 100 employee number again just makes me scratch my head.
To your point, like you can continue to test positive for potential weeks.
Yeah, they've said up to 12 weeks you can test positive.
If that's the case, then you've got somebody who's out of the workforce and is not vaxxed, let's say. They have to test weekly and they're constantly testing positive, so each week they can't come into work technically. And I mean, y'all said this from the beginning. When this first came out, both of you, I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, said that people are just not going to follow it. If they have labor shortages and someone's willing to come into work, they're just going to have to either finagle it to their benefit or they'll pay the fine. And, you look at that. I mean, if the meat industry is sitting here having to pay fine after fine, I mean, how's that going to cripple, their ability to, lower prices so that John can get more pounds of ground beef for his taco night,
Courtney, one, you're not wrong, so I'm not going to correct you. And then two, I've learned in the past it's just best not to correct you, even when you're deadly wrong.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. But you're right, and it's here we are facing the stark reality of want to make everyone safe, want to have mandates, want to seem like we're doing something, and how it actually impacts the economy. In the past, I've always said that politicians get too much credit for the good times and too much blame for the bad. Moving forward, if we continue to persist on policies that we've shown that they don't really work in stopping the spread of the virus, all they do is stop the spread of economic activity. If we continue to persist with this, then I guess we just have to call ourselves insane, because that's the definition of insanity, doing something over and over again and expecting a different result. So that's kind of what I'm seeing here. Sam, you brought up a very good point. The fact that CDC's lost a lot of faith from the population. Hey, you're vaccinated, you're going to be fine. Well, no, you're not, but go get a booster. And then people are getting COVID on top of the vaccination plus the boost.
They're boosted and they're still getting.
And I'm not saying that this is not an overall positive. However, people are still getting COVID. How many false positives have we had across? How many people are walking around asymptomatic? And all of a sudden they have some sort of false positive, and then everyone has to go home. That happened. Right. That happened last year a couple times. Everyone has to go home for 2 weeks. And if we're going to continue to do this type of stuff, we're going to continue to see beef prices go up. We're going to continue to see airline flights being canceled. We're going to see produce shelves being less than fully stocked. And for people listening outside of the United States, it is kind of a shock to go to a grocery store in the United States and see empty shelves. To see the meat section not full, and to see.
Do you think that people will start hoarding, like we did before? I mean, I will tell you, my husband about lost it on me because I have like 10 containers of
Kramer.
No, I'm down to 3. But no, like
that sausage your family likes.
It's so good. And peanut butter. Like, I was like, well, it's on sale, and I always use it. So, and he was like, stop, like, buying it. But I'm like, now you're sitting here and I'm kind of feeling a little frantic. Like, I need to go to the store and, like, buy up some ground beef and put it in the freezer because I don't want to be out of it.
I mean, we weren't, thinking of that we were stockpiling and hoarding, but we've probably spent twice what we normally do at the store this week just because we had to go to several stores to find the things we wanted. So, if they don't have chicken at one and I go to the other and they have 2 packs and I only needed 1, well, I'm probably just going to go ahead and get 2 since I had to go to 2 stores already. And so it's not always as conscious, I'm going to hoard and get as much as I can, but sometimes it's just, hey, there's not always some of this, so I'm going to get a little more than I used to.
So if we're seeing shortages of this type of stuff, I don't think it's due to a shortage of cows. And I also don't think it's a shortage of chickens. It's the average chicken that we eat is about 6 weeks old. It's pretty easy to grow one of those things. It's a question of not having enough people processing them and then also not getting them to the stores in a timely manner. So if that's what we're dealing with, any sort of mandate that puts people out of work on top of an already low labor force participation rate is going to hinder economic activity. Plain and simple, period. End of discussion.
Yeah.
No argument, Sam?
I will not argue. No argument here.
Didn't y'all also talk about the fact, though, that we're seeing some increase just with inflation in general, right? Increase in cost at the grocery store. Do you foresee that even when labor, when we have a stronger labor force and we, don't have this policy, I mean, what's the big driver in bringing these prices down? Are people still going to be willing to pay? I mean, do you foresee it going back to what it was, or do you think there's probably somewhere in the middle ground?
It's probably going to be someplace in the middle ground. We have just a ton of liquidity in the market, which is driving some of the price increases. I mean, there's just a ton of cash floating about. M2 has grown exponential levels for a number of different reasons for another podcast. However, some of the stuff that we're seeing now in terms of paying $7 plus for a package of ground round is just, or ground chuck, actually, that's what I bought last night. That just really has more to do with shortages. And so we can say the shortages are due for a variety of reasons. I'm going to say a lot of it's due to not having enough people to deliver the product. And once we have that, yeah, we should see more product on the shelves, which should lead to, just supply growing faster
supply
than
and demand.
demand. And so when supply goes up faster than demand, prices should fall. However, producers and stores are going, man, we were getting $7, not so long ago. I want to still try to get that. And that's just capitalism. That's just the way it is. It's not necessarily greed. It's just being smart, trying to make a profit. So instead of going back down to 4, fully expect maybe a pound of ground chuck to go from 7, what I paid last night, maybe down to 5, $5.50. And that's just kind of the way inflation works.
Yep.
Well, Courtney, how about you? You got any other questions about all this?
No, I think we covered a lot.
A lot of
yeah.
sheets of paper over there.
I know. All my articles that I've printed off.
I got to tell you, Courtney, I did actually find the creamer that you like that has a
Yeah.
picture of a cupcake on it, and I almost sent it to you. And then I figured, nah, I don't think.
No, I was threatened that I was not allowed to buy anymore. So
So,
I'm getting low. I'm down to 2. I told you I'm on the third. So, I'm going to have to buy some more.
The store where I went last night, they were low on creamer and milk. So you got to be careful about that.
Yes.
Well, guys, thank you all so much for listening. We always love to hear from you. Also, if you have any questions or comments, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can go to our website, oakworth.com, and take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab to find all kinds of good information. All right, guys, what do y'all say?
That's all I got.
Yep.
That's all I got today, too. Y'all take care.